welcome, folks, to this episode of Fluffenbusters. It's Mr. D and Mr. White, your humble hosts.
Hello.
And today, Mr. White's made the decision of what we're watching. And to paraphrase, we're going to be getting our asses to Mars.
Indeed. So, a little introduction to this.
Hmm.
The weird and wonderful world of awards.
Yes.
And you have all sorts of awards, especially if you're a film. You've got your short film festivals and your local film festivals, your little communities, and then you go a little bit higher and you've got, I don't know, like the trendy ones, like the MTV Music Awards used to have movies and other things. You've got Hugo Awards, and then it gets a bit bigger. You've got up to the Emmys and the Grammys, that sort of level, and of course you've got the BAFTAs. But at the top of the tree, you've got the Oscars.
Yeah.
And you'll know, because we will always talk about this every year, you've got your standard categories. But then you've got a couple of extra ones.
Yes. Oh, the Cecil B. DeMille Award, yeah.
Yeah. And that's typically given to somebody who hasn't won an Oscar before, but has a huge body of work, wants to be celebrated. They're probably retired, and it's a chance for the Academy to stand up and applaud them.
Yeah.
And then there's another one, and it's known as the Special Achievement Oscar. It's gone by a few names. Now, this is an Oscar so special.
Yeah.
It is decided for before the ceremony, and it is for a person or team or element that has elevated the film that it is part of to such a level that it not just elevates the film, but it elevates Hollywood. A lot of categories that we now have started out by winning this award. So, for instance, I believe the first Toy Story won this award for the special achievement was, of course, animation.
Yeah.
And, of course, not long after that, computer animated films or animated films as well, got their own awards. The film that we're seeing tonight won one of these awards for special effects. This is a film that you might think is schlock in many ways, that you might think is gory in many ways, but won a special Oscar. This is a film that you might think is dumb or crude, but this is a film that had more than 40 drafts. This is a film that has been fought for and put together with some of the highest quality that you will ever see. And yet, the end result is a almost classic blockbuster. It is a film of contradictions.
Very much so.
And it's something that I'm really looking forward to watching and having a natter with you about, Dee, because I think it's going to be fascinating.
Absolutely. I'm as soon as you mentioned this, when I was like, I can't wait for this, because if it wasn't true, it's Total Recall from 1990.
Yes, let's be clear here. 1990.
Yes, not the 2011 version, which
it's not bad. It's just different.
It just shouldn't have had Total Recall as the name. Sadly,
wasn't there a TV show as well?
There was a TV show in, I think, the late 90s, early 2000s, which tried to if I remember rightly, it tried to adapt a bit more of the stuff from the short story that it's based on.
Sure.
Or it tried to incorporate elements of that they couldn't do in either film, to be fair.
Okay, so what I suggest, and we're gonna hopefully we'll jump into the film in a sec, but I want to do something for the people that are listening to this, because if you're listening to this, it means that you're listening probably on the YouTube video, and you've probably got YouTube open on one of the screens on your computer. So the deal is with these is that, of course, we can't show the film. We know that, you know that. I think the film is on YouTube, but it was uploaded back in the wonderful days before copyright, and I don't think you could even use the footage, ironically, from that YouTube video in a current video. But instead, what we're going to do is I'm going to have a little play. We're going to have a lot of stills coming up, so you'll see where we are through the movie. Of course, you can, join along at home and watch the movie there. But also, we'll try and put in some extra footage as well, behind the scenes, some trailer stuff, and give you kind of like a halfway house to experiencing the film. So if you are going to listen to this and watch it on YouTube, can you let us know what it's like? Because this is just something that we're going to try out as a bit of an experiment. And if you like it, we'll do more of it.
Definitely. And honestly, when Adam told me over this, I thought it sounded like a great idea. So any feedback, much appreciated.
Yes.
On which note, let's get the film rolling. So, starting from, well, from zero. So, Anna 1, Anna 2, Anna. That's interesting because the version I'm watching is a remaster, which has the old Studio Canal logo at the front, which the original didn't, if I remember rightly. I don't think it did anyway. Then you have the Carol Co. God, so many classics from the 80s had this logo at the start, and into the 90s, it was one of those brands that you knew you were going to be watching something that could be quite a bit OTT, shall we say?
Yeah. So, okay, let's start off with. I know there's a lot of stuff that we can go into with like how this film came to be
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. But when did you first hear about the film growing up?
I think I saw a feature on TV about special effects. To be fair,
Okay.
uh, it it was either to do with it was probably all to do with the immigration scene on Mars with the head disguise and the X-ray scanner,
Mm.
possibly a bit of the hologram as well. And that was, like I say, that was my introduction because I say there was just one of these TV specials. Might have been entertainment news, something like that. Because
Movie magic?
possibly we were living in Hong Kong at the time,
Oh, okay.
and the TV was a bit weird there, where we'd have a really weird. Mostly it was American stuff we had.
Hmm.
Not much British stuff. So it was probably one of those Hollywood type shows. Doing a,
Just so that I can get a little link into my editing. Have you got credits up on the screen at the moment?
I do.
What credits are just coming up?
Special effects by Rob Bottin.
Lovely, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a weird time as well because for a long time you would see like making ofs and previews of movies, and because studios were just getting into this realm of like they would publicize their movie with the making of.
Yeah, yeah.
Like for instance, the making of I think it was Moonwalker. The making of Moonwalker was like put on TV a lot, and I think was its own video like release before the film came out or something. And so
That
you would
sounds
see,
about right. To be fair, yeah.
and of course they would tackle all of these in a very safe way, and there wouldn't be any of the gunshot sequences, but you could technically see chunks of a feature film
Hmm.
before the feature film came out, even if that feature film was a 15 or 18, and you would see it on a Saturday morning.
I mean, of course, there's your Barry Norman movie review show.
Yeah, he's for those overseas, that's the UK Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but back in the day, ITV ran a show called Talking Movies, and it was basically like they'd find bits of these, they'd take bits of these making of for
Mm.
upcoming films. So that's how I got introduced to thing. I knew that Swordfish was on its way,
Yep.
and several other features. So yeah, it was real interesting. Oh, and this is the scene that makes everyone go a bit, what the?
It's right. I'm just gonna say as well, in as I mentioned before, doing
Mm,
stuff for the YouTube, I took a lot of stills from this. And you're not some of this stuff goes past so quickly. But
mm,
when Arnie falls there, the shot of the reaction of the young lady, it's a beautiful shot.
mm,
And it's something that I never even like thought when you watch it, it's so quick, it's gone in a second.
mm.
And it just has this there's so many good cinematography choices in this film.
Definitely. I mean, Paul Verhoeven. We kind of missed his. We miss him, as a filmmaker, because he really he could shoot a movie.
Yeah. I suppose a lot of this begins. If we're talking, there's a couple of different stories that make this film what it is. Firstly,
Mm.
there's the original story, which is, I think, as everyone knows, Philip K. Dick. It is the new wave sci-fi, which is sort of 60s, 70s, has had a huge impact just because it led to things like cyberpunk, and a lot of sci-fi sort of came out of it. It was very influential. Um, and of course, you had the big couple. You have Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep,
Mm.
and We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. Two stories that were then like Do Androids Dream became Blade Runner and was adapted there, and this is We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. The problem with adapting those is, like all of the new wave sci-fi and cyberpunk, is that they are quite light on story.
Mm.
They don't have a lot of detail, and also the ending of a lot of cyberpunk stories is not a good one. And I say
No.
that while Sharon Stone was wrapping her leg around Arnold.
Yeah.
But so when you had these stories being adapted, and that is the phrase, by the way, adapted, it
Mm.
meant that the filmmakers would really struggle with the script, because early on, that like the first maybe half of the movie, three quarters of the movie, you had this beautiful story based off of these short stories. But because
Yeah.
the endings were so short, or they had quite a nihilistic air to them, it meant that it was difficult for the filmmakers to translate that to Hollywood. And this is apparently the big challenge with Total Recall, in the sense that Mars didn't exist,
Mm.
and there was a lot of challenges of like, we love the start of this film, but how do we end it?
Yeah.
And then you had, and this, I'm sure people know this, so I don't want to go too heavy wiki on this, but there are people who won't realize this at one point was going to be done by a series of directors. One of them was David Cronenberg, which I just love to see what he would have made of this.
Mm.
This was done by, or attempted by, at least one other studio that went bankrupt. And then Arnold comes in. Now, do you know a lot about this, how this film came into being and what Arnold did?
I honestly didn't, because I know at this point this is kind of Arnie was leaving. Well, obviously it's the end of the 80s. Arnie's pretty much at his peak. This
Yeah,
is getting this is pre-Terminator 2, so he
yep.
hasn't reached that
Family
massive high
family
yet.
friendly, all audience stuff. Yep.
Mm. And this is kind of like his last big brutal action movie.
Yeah. So he's at this point he's established himself as a person in Hollywood. He's
Mm.
established himself as a known, recognizable actor. He's also established himself as that guy with the funny accent with
Mm.
the big muscles. But of course, as I think everybody knows, and well, people tend to forget nowadays because of his more avuncular nature, and he's not afraid to take the mickey out of himself. But
Mm.
this is a very sharp and canny guy, a
Oh yeah.
very, very determined and focused guy.
I mean,
Um,
he was a millionaire before he got into acting.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way please, there's a documentary called Pumping Iron, which talks about bodybuilding at
Mm.
the peak time when Arnie was in it. It is absolutely worth seeing for the politics, the body image issues, the steroids, the lifestyle, and the
Mm.
way that Arnie was just one step above everyone.
Yeah.
But
He-
Arnie was in Hollywood, and he saw RoboCop, and he loved it, and he recognized from seeing that the director, Paul Verhoeven,
Mm.
was a director that would suit him.
Yes.
A director very strong. And people, I think even at the time, because a lot of stories from the set went going into Hollywood, admittedly through making ofs, but they weren't as polished as they were today. So you had a
Mm.
sense of realism. But he recognized that strong director trait. So think the James Cameron.
Yeah.
And he was so this is what they said in one of the commentaries, is that Arnie literally saw him in a restaurant with people, went up and just barged onto the table and went, "Hi, I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger. I love RoboCop. I love what you did. I'm going to work with you." Hi, shakes hands, off he
Yeah.
goes. He then goes, tries to get on I think it was the Cronenberg or another version, where Dino De Laurentiis, I probably said that wrong, but and Dino doesn't want him on the film. So the previous version of Total Recall, Arnie can't play the lead character. He just plays, I think he's a minor character, or he just doesn't get it. So anyway, I think the studio goes bankrupt. The rights are up for sale, and he goes to the guys at Carol Co., who he's already done a couple of films with, and he says, "Guys, this is the film. I want you to buy these rights. Buy them now." And they literally buy it within a couple of hours. He finds out the writers, who are the guys. When they wrote the script, they hit a dead end, and then they went on to write a small film called Alien.
Yeah.
And then they came back to this, and they were still trying to get this thing moving. So Arnie phones them up and goes, "Guys, let's go. Off we go. We're going to make this happen." He then phones up Paul Verhoeven and goes, "Hey, you know that film idea I'd like to work with you on? Well, I've got the film. Let's do it." And that was about it. That was it. So Arnie really put this together. And this is when, and I know, sorry, I'm rambling a lot here. Hopefully people listening don't mind this.
This is wonderful because
back in the old days, you used to have a thing called executive producers. Now, you still have this nowadays. If you watch a Star Trek show, there are 1,500 of the bloody things at the beginning of the credits. An executive producer is a bear, a friendly bear. So, for instance, Attack the Block, Joe Cornish, first-time director, so his mate from Hot Fuzz, Edgar Wright, is the executive producer. He knows the director well. He's not going to run over his movie, but he's a big guy in the British scene who can step in to help out if things need. If things go wrong, he's someone to give advice on. He's there. He's a Godfather type character. Back in the 80s and especially the 90s, Steven Spielberg was a huge, huge executive producer until he ended up becoming one of the first to really do it, executive producer just for cash. And so it's just a payday. So that's unfortunately the way it is now. But Arnie, think of Arnie as an unofficial executive producer for this film. And everything, he has permeated so much through this film, so many good stories. And I've realized we have missed so much whilst I've been rabbiting on about that.
I know it does a lot here to establish the bones of what we're going to be dealing with.
Yeah.
And also, because if people aren't aware, there's a whole thing where you're not supposed to know if Doug's actually awake or not.
Yep.
Any point in this.
Nope.
So, and it's quite canny that everything the film does in this opening act retains that consistency. If you watch a film with that theory, then in mind, then it's consistent. It holds up, but it's never explicitly shouted out anywhere. To my knowledge, it's one of those things that you can read it that way.
You can read it, yeah. And they set it up as well. They don't try and hide it. It's like they offer you both options all the way through this. And again, this is an Arnie movie, so you don't expect it to be sophisticated, which is part of the reason why I wanted to do it. There's so many little things that he turns on his head. Also as well, like you're going to see it all the way through this anyway. The style of all the buildings and everything is neo-brutalism. It was shot in Mexico. So think the Barbican Centre in London for any of you in the UK. There's a reason, by the way. Like Barbican, elements of the Barbican we use for Andor. You know, I mean, it keeps popping up. And one of the things I always, as soon as I say it, is these little pock marks in the concrete on the walls and bare concrete walls. It's just something about the brutalist style, and you'll see a lot of weird sort of stylistic choices like that coming back later. But there's all sorts of, and if there's one thing that this film really excels at as well, it's props.
Oh
And I know
yes.
there's bigger things that we should be talking about. There's so many good little juicy props and things that the guys are working with, and they do everything they can. I mean, Arnie's using a glorified Etch-a-Sketch at this point.
Yeah.
And all it is like a board with a light on it. There's nothing technical, but it has that futuristic feel. It's like as
Yes.
well, it's like behind him, he's got a TV set in the wall. Well, they want to make you think that that's a flat screen because you've seen a flat screen already. And they do this like so many times in the film. And I know it sounds like a really odd thing to sort of focus on, but it's all this team works so hard to create this futuristic set that once they've done the hard work, you then buy into everything else. And of course, the biggest special effect here is Arnie, who is playing a dumb guy, an oblivious guy, working off the fact that he's big and, it's Arnold.
Yeah.
But we know he's also a super intelligent guy. So there's some acting going on here.
Definitely. And and he is genuinely putting in some good acting of this. It's hard to people do forget that in spite of the accent, which he actually works to keep it as part of his brand now.
Oh, absolutely.
He said he's quite open about that. That at one point he was worried he was going to lose it, and that was that was his most identifying feature. But also because so many of his characters, he'd played a lot of Russians. He'd done the Terminator, famously stony-faced, and he was genuinely worried that people didn't think he could act.
Yeah.
Because he could do physical stuff easy. But
speaking of acting as well, there's a really weird balance in this film. For a start, the two medics here, and this isn't wiki stuff. This is just stuff I realized while watching the film and preparing the stills. Both these guys actually have gone on to have huge careers. The doctor who's giving him the jab at the moment has worked non-stop, like ever since, and is still working to this very day. But she arguably has more lines than almost any other person in the film.
yeah,
Because it's just because of this scene. Because there's not a massive amount of lines afforded to anyone. I mean, at the moment, how much is like Michael Ironside said or Ronnie Cox? How much? I mean, we haven't even seen the female love interest. It's actually quite a solo film for Arnie, and as Verhoeven says as well, from the moment that he falls asleep, this is a chase movie.
Yes.
And he just runs and runs and runs and runs. But of course, as well, you've got these, as you said, like there's the like, is this a dream? Is he awake? So he starts imagining stuff, not only happening to him, but the world around him the moment he drops off. And of course, whilst they're doing all of this, twice now they've described the elements of the film. They've given you the plot twice, especially the guy just there, the little tech guy, who I believe he goes, "Oh, blue sky ending," or something like that. Really crazy.
Absolutely.
And of course, this prop ended up, being the thing that people fixated on when it came to the next, the remake with Colin Farrell. It's like, oh, well, they've got that in. It's fine.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
weird.
now, this is a really crappy fact. We'll lose all of our listeners on this one. So films around this time had these kind of video phone things with speakers on them, and it's very much a telling thing of its time. And you think, well, that was just them imagining the future, right?
Yeah.
But it isn't. It's because around that time, I think it was Sony actually put out a thing called the vid phone. It didn't sell very well. In fact, it's one of those things that just died a death. And there was like an empty market until mobile eventually took over. It's one of the most comically bad things you've ever seen. You could send an image via the vid phone, but you would actually have to cut off the call, and it could send a still image via the equivalent of a CFAX resolution image. And you could only take a picture if it was facing you. It's really weird. But
Yeah.
it was why, for a period of time, you had all these weird vid phones. But of course, people, especially receptionists, realized that maybe having everyone on speaker and video wasn't good when you were talking about patients. So it wasn't a
Yeah.
surprise that they've all gone back to either headsets or regular phones. But it's weird. It's like it pops up at every film around this time. They thought it was the future. And so these things always turn up.
Yeah, there's it's real fun sometimes going back and watching these movies and seeing where people thought stuff would be going.
Retrofuturism.
Yeah, and now we know that they're just these dead ends. It's really quite fascinating to go back and see it. But then you also have stuff like, I mean, now what was it? There was a film I remember watching where a character, and this is like early 90s, and you have a character on a video call, multiple people on the one screen, all their family having a conversation together.
Yeah.
And you can do that now on your iPad. My family, we do it quite a lot for Christmas birthdays and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And celebrations. Oh, Bob Picardo.
Yeah.
Which
Go on. I'll let you do this.
no, I just love that. It's the Doctor, and the weird thing is that this is when Robert Picardo was much more kind of a skeevy bad guy actor. He'd done The Howling. He'd been in Gremlins 2. I think Gremlins 2 was before this. And he wasn't really an effects guy or really a genre guy, or
No,
even what we think was.
But he was the guy in the costume.
Yes, and that is a costume. That's
oh no,
great.
Well, no, I mean, so he got this, and this is weird because this is not something that I learned when I knew we were coming up to do this film. This is something I knew from back in the day because back then I was just getting into film and wanted to explore film, and me and my friend were doing a lot of like homemade special effects and prosthetics, puppets and stuff like that. And so we would watch these making ofs, and Robert Picardo was the guy to put in a creature suit. He was that era's Doug Jones.
Yeah.
And he, for instance, he'd done the bog monster in Legend.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So and he also was in Explorers, and like famously, they just found him one day. They'd forgot to basically take him out of a costume, and he was sat in his costume crying because he couldn't move and he was in so much pain. And he was known as such a worker in Hollywood that when it came to this film, they modeled the cab driver after him and he voiced it, but it was as a thank you. It was as a respectful nod, with the idea being that for once he wasn't going to be in costume. He actually had the easiest job of the cast. It was it was incredible.
That's actually kind of sweet.
It is. It's lovely, and it's something. So when it came to the film, I was more excited to see Bob Picardo than anyone else because I'd heard so much about it. We should say as well these. Oh God, there's so much. You see, this is what Johnny Mnemonic has done to me. I've got so much information now. All the action scenes here are shot by Vic Armstrong. Vic Armstrong is stunt genius. Think the main Indiana guy.
Yeah, he was Harrison Ford's main stunt double on the original Indy movies. He's gone on to be. There's a lot of stuff where he is second unit director on.
Yes, and he did second unit on this, and his stuff on this is excellent. And they had to work quite fast on doing this stuff, but they weren't like the way that Arnie was able to move. And it's always amazed me as well because the guy that he beats up, which is his mate, is like the least. I mean, none of the guys he's threatened have been physically intimidating. He's been beaten up by some workmates, but they're all like half the size of Arnold. And yet he made it work in the moment.
That fight's a funny old moment.
Yeah, because he's genuinely shocked at what he's done, but he's also really good at what he's done. It's that I never thought of Arnold as like a really like I know he can swing a punch, but it was watching this that made me think that he was really like he should have spent more time. I think like fight scenes were never highly coordinated with Arnold. There was a lot of like showmanship, and there were moments, and there were the quips. But he's a really good technical fighter, I think, especially when he's being trained. So,
well, it's like, have you looked into any of the behind the scenes stuff on Conan?
No. And Conan's one, by the way, we probably have to do at some point.
Oh, at some point, definitely. But there's a whole thing where Sandal Bergman, and I forget the name of the guy who played Subratai. Basically, all three of them went in. They had heavy sword fighting training, and we're talking full on kendo style sword fighting training.
Yeah,
and they all took it deadly serious. I mean, the stuff where I know it gets a bit memed that in Conan he's swinging that heavy sword around, but he is swinging a bloody heavy sword around in a way that most people would struggle to use something much lighter. But he's also doing it there's technique there.
Yeah.
And it's something I've always liked about Arnie that I've become more aware of, is that he's much more athletic than people give him credit for, because so much of his filmography they play up his physicality when he's actually he was quite the athletic performer. And like you say, if he'd had more stuff that let him do more choreographed fights, more structured ones, that could have been something special. But it was kind of the era. It wasn't really how 80s Hollywood action movies went their way.
That's this is the thing as well. There was an expectation that he would act a certain way in this film, which I always think is frustrating, because then the critics would like try and rip him apart. But like, especially in this moment, he's actually quite vulnerable.
Yeah.
And although he's a big guy, you're right. Like, one of the reasons why he did so well at the Olympia, and he got all these bodybuilding awards, was because when it came to posing, I'm pretty sure he at least was filmed like visiting ballet classes.
Yeah. He
By the way,
dance.
I know we're probably going to be out of sync on some of our movies, but this always reminds me a bit of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, because just for a moment, I thought that him and his person playing his wife, they were going to have like a really real talk. But then she plays her card too much and tries to be cheesy, and it's just like, why did you do that? And yet he just seems like imagine Arnie being an everyday man. It just seems so wrong, and yet he almost pulls it off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he only really looks superhuman, ironically, earlier when he's at the quarry with that huge drill, which is just, no one should really be able to hold it the way he does. Yet he does play this with a real vulnerability.
Yeah, and that was like one of the many elements he brought to this. Also, as well, you'll see there is so much like just now as well. There's so much moving with the camera, and this is all being done on a dolly, I believe, because I can see it in a lot of the making of footage, and it's just so well done. Like, you don't get this in Hollywood now. I'm thinking about like recent discussions with, I think we spoke about this already, but the Gladiator 2 is obviously out at the moment. Gladiator 1 DP was talking about, like, he didn't do Gladiator 2, and he didn't like the fact that nowadays they just set it up really bland lighting. They get a couple of cameras in there to get all the shots at once, and they just film it, and there's no originality. I'm like, even here, moving in slowly, panning up, just for the right composition. And it just don't get. And again, there we go, moving back, tweaking it. It's more than you get in films today, and there's a lot of beautiful shots, framing. Every character gets a moment. I'm gonna go on a lot about cameras and stuff. Like also as well, this scene, like they use the shot that says the southbound metro, which was shot at a metro. The only real change they made was to paint stuff grey. But they did a ton of shots here because they're using local buildings with this wonderful visual style that makes it look like the future, and it's like the old 1970s style future as well.
Yeah.
But I suppose we probably need to talk about skeletons. Do you want to say anything? Because I'm talking too much, I know already.
I mean, it was a real groundbreaking bit of effects work there to see these CGI skeletons that were following the actors' movements pretty much. I'm not sure if it was actual proper motion cap as we imagine it nowadays.
I pretty much sure it wasn't. I mean, considering some of the other effects in this film, I think it was just, again, they were just animating something that would fit in, and they did have the reference of the characters. But it still looks incredible. I mean, it was on all the teaser posters and stuff and trailers.
Oh yeah. Now the gunplay starts, and good God.
Yeah. So everyone, we're watching a Paul Verhoeven film.
Yep. And if you haven't seen RoboCop, then well, now you know what to expect for the rest of this movie. It's going to be, well, he uses his squib budget with excess.
Oh, it does. It's funny though. You look at the color of the blood as well. It's so comically bright and.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't even realize that. I've seen it like a bunch of times, and I didn't realize they literally, to add insult to injury, they run over the guy that gets shot as well. When a little accident on set, when Arnie was meant to punch that window, squib was meant to go off, and it timed it wrong, and he ended up cutting his hand. Arnie, being Arnie, went to the medic, got himself stitched up during lunchtime, and was back shooting in the afternoon. And this was when a lot of the rest of the crew as well were going down with bugs because they were shooting in Mexico and they were eating the food out there and they were having issues. And Arnie was just like pulling double duty and just keeping everyone together.
I mean, I think he probably learned his lesson from Predator, you know?
Oh, he did. He said he had his own food. The only time he got sick, and they say this in one of the docos, is he had a chef cooking all his food. His chef got ill, so he had to eat with the crew on one day, and then he got sick. But apparently, I think it was one of the writers was like a hypochondriac, and so only had like bottled water to brush his teeth with. So he didn't get sick. He was the only guy that remained immune, which I thought was quite cool.
Yeah.
But funny enough, there were no reports of like everyone hitting the gym at 6 a.m. like Predator. So at least Arnie had it a bit easier.
There is that. And I have to say, if you're going to pick villains to go up against Schwarzenegger, then Ronnie Cox and Michael Ironside is a damn good pair.
Well, Ronnie Cox has appeared briefly in two sections. Ironside's were interesting because he's a menacing character, but he doesn't have that physicality.
No, and he never has done. But he's always been. He's got Michael Ironside's an interesting one because he's become a quintessential character actor where you can name a setting and he's probably been in it at some point.
Oh yeah, he's done tons.
Or you'll see his face and go, "I recognize you," and his voice work as well. But he can do heroic exceptionally well, but he's become most famous for bad guys and some real memorable ones at that. So of course he was in Scanners, and then here in Total Recall as Richter. Sadly, he was also in Highlander 2, which that film still baffles me to this day.
Hollywood Hollywood films again, to those who are newer to films and filmmaking and film discussion, don't think that the disasters that you hear about at the moment, for instance, the Sony Spider adjacent films, your your Black what was it,
Cravens,
Madam
yeah,
Web
Madam
and
Web,
yeah. Um,
yeah,
okay,
Morbius.
Hollywood has always had a healthy dose of screwing over its own movies. I should know. I'm doing a project on one at the moment, but this again, the fact is that Arnold was always there. Arnold has been quoted as really pulling this up. Like when they needed extra money for certain scenes, Arnold would be there. When they were going to cut a shot, what we'll see later in the film, which like everyone was in agreement that we need this shot. We have to have this shot. Arnie went to the studio and went, "We're having this shot." He went above and beyond, and even all the way to the advertising, which we'll probably talk about later. But there's a lot of stuff. I'm fascinated by this guy because I believe you only see him for like a brief scene, but there's never any other form of payoff with him.
Yeah, he just appears and then goes. It's kind of fascinating because you'd expect him to return in like the final act or something
Yeah,
to play a
or
bigger
even
role.
at least be one of the henchmen.
Yeah, that as well. Something to kind of mess with the audience and with Quaid to play with the double agent aspect of things.
Oh, car design by Ron Cobb. I'm sorry, I can't not say that. Just because it's one of those things that ties this to Blade Runner. You know, there are a lot of things. I mean, the cut as well. The weirdest thing about the crew is that when Verhoeven was going to make this, he just went, "Okay, right. I did RoboCop. Arnie likes RoboCop. I like RoboCop. Everyone likes RoboCop. Let's just get the RoboCop crew." So it's the RoboCop crew. So this is so close to being a sequel. And then when you realize as well that Ironside was, I think, at one point the first choice to be Murphy in
Oh,
RoboCop,
that's interesting.
but either he didn't get the script or there was some reason, but it wasn't enough to like sour the relationship. And you just think, there's yeah, there should have been, this people talk about it like the Verhoeven kind of sci-fi trilogy, and they wish it was a shared universe. And of course, there was an attempted sequel made for this, but ended up again not working. Studio interference, everyone ummed and ahed, and eventually it became its own thing, and eventually became Minority Report.
Oh, that I didn't realize that it was originally intended to be a sequel.
I believe it was. I don't know what level. I don't know to what extent. And of course, you again, something I'm learning as well is that you can listen to like 15 commentaries and read 20 documents and listen to a bunch of interviews, and you'll notice that the same facts are said over and over again, but with slight variances. And
Yeah.
so there's always like you never can quite believe what's being said. It's like as well stuff on set, like when actors and directors get together after the facts, and the director goes, "Oh, there was real drama on the set," and the actor goes, "Oh, I never knew that." And it's like, "Yes, you did. You were part of it." It's they're playing the game. Oh, this is what I mentioned to you earlier that I
You
really
did.
love.
I was actually waiting, and I think I've just seen how they managed to hide the monitor, which I never realized before, with that huge box they put on on the slab. It's camouflage.
Yeah, it's crazy. Also, as well, the design, like the design of the bug extractor always reminds me of something that you put around like a container of sealant when you're doing your tiles in your bathroom.
It's not something you really want to be putting anywhere near your schnoz, put it that way. So, do you want to fill the audience in on how this worked, Adam?
Okay, yeah. So I think we're probably going to be out of sync now, but when he takes this briefcase out, you'll see very quickly a shot of Arnie staring back at the screen, and it's a video screen. And then when you actually see Arnie sit down and he looks at the screen starts moving. Well, when he opened that briefcase up, it was just a picture of Arnie backlit. That's all it was. It was like a lit picture frame because they want to give you the impression of it being a monitor. And then when he's actually sat down and looking at the thing, as you say, they've got a box behind him. They've shoved a TV in there, an old cathode ray, and that's how they did it. These are small practical things. It's like as well in that moment we saw the hologram, the stealth hologram, and all it is Arnie walking towards us in shot with a mime who's mimicking his moves, walking towards him and away from the camera, and we believe it. We believe it because they put a little bit of static on there and so and so forth, and you believe it. And all these little things, and this is a high budget movie. This is an expensive movie, but it's also arguably the last movie where they went full practical, and there was a little bit of computer animation, but it's kept to a minimum. And it's like they go for the practical. And when you go for the practical, it means that you're constantly working to find ways to make things better, like tweaking and stuff. And as someone who's been on set, you can do so much by tweaking the camera and doing small things, making things a little bit more interesting, or lowering the lighting but in order to do that, you need the cast and crew to trust each other. Like everyone working really hard together, and to get the best people. And Arnie was a big thing about that. So I think at the moment, hopefully we're both saying you're seeing Arnie have a bit of a nose scratch session, and like that's done by Rob Bottin, who was part of the special effects unit. Rob Bottin is Mr. Thing, and is a legend in Hollywood for his special effects. He would only do, I think about a decade's more films after this, because he eventually left because everyone was moving to digital and he didn't like it. And he's done like a little bit here and there, but never really that much. But this was arguably his high point, and it was lovely that he was one of the people that won an Oscar for this as well.
Definitely, because the way you said that this was one of the last films to do like it, and it's
that really went big. That went big on it, I should say. Yeah,
and the thing is, this is a proper science fiction movie. It's not like something like T2, which is more of an action movie with scenes that are set in the future, but they're kind of brief scenes. You don't spend a lot of time there. It's mostly present day or near future, if anything. This is a proper. They've worked to make this a future world, and like I say, it's pretty much all practical.
Yeah. And also as well, again, look at these shots. Look at the camera movement. Consider where they're filming as well. They're filming in a rough place. It's not easy to film. This is a practical place as well. This is like a cement works, I believe. Which again, if you worked on films, you probably worked at a cement works, because honestly, they're perfect places. But there's a lot of like working with the lighting. The lighting is moving around. The guys are using their torches and they're shining the lights in certain areas on certain cues. Trust me, there is no accident why there are strobes and there are flashes and there are all sorts of things.
Verhoeven liked to make his firearms have a nice bit of brrrt to them and muzzle flash, which adds a wonderful flavour to. You can always tell his action scenes because of that. If nothing else, that would give you the clue, but there's so much more to his movies that you can tell when it's Verhoeven involved. You really can.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's got and I remember this scene in particular was quite special to see that shuttle come in. That's a nice bit of model work, and then you have immigration, which just
it's been replicated in so really good.
It's been mimicked in so many other sci-fi movies and shows because it's such a brilliant way of doing it. It's just treating it like, well, we do today, but a little bit extra.
It's funny in one of the commentaries, I think Arnie just goes, "Oh, we see this fat old woman And it's like, Arnie, it's not really that old. It's just she's just a larger woman.
Mm.
It's just well played though, and there's an error, sorry, error. There's an element of Hollywood. Oh, do you want to talk about the security guy?
Uh,
I don't know if you know who he is.
is it the dude in the orange beret?
Yeah,
Oh God, it's Gold Ducat.
it is.
How did I not know that Mark Alaimo was in this? Good Lord, that's
Funnily enough, not the only Star Trek alumni to be in this film, but yeah, just a nice early role. So there's
yeah.
for those of you as well who've only watched the like the reboot version, there is a nod to this lady, and there's a nice as well, a nice little nod to Arnie, I believe, in that film's immigration scene.
Yeah, I think there was. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was definitely something in there. Yeah.
She, credit to this woman as well. This woman really sells it. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
think anyone gives her enough credit. It's very much like the Tex at the start. She
Mm.
does a ton.
Oh yeah.
But
And
yeah,
this scene got repeated
oh, it was
so many
everywhere.
times. Yeah.
It was everywhere.
Mm,
And I'll be sticking this in the definitely in the video accompanying this. But the mechanism that they use on this face is just beautiful. It's
mm,
arguably it's what I don't get is it's more beautiful when you see it in real life than it is here,
mm.
which
Because you
is
said
not.
it's a real mechanical.
It's a real mechanical thing, which it amazes me because it's like they did a better job with that face in the mechanics than they did on the Arnie that was underneath it. And I know that's a bit
Mm.
cruel, but I think that's one of the only weak things I think about this film.
I mean, in fairness, he's had a bit of poor luck because most of the films where he's had to have a prosthetic face stand in for him, and it sounds weird because you'd think his features are quite distinctive and easy to do
Yeah.
because it's Arnie, one of the most famous faces on the planet. But the original Terminator, the earliest scene where you see when they got the machine taking the thing out of his nose,
Yep.
scene in Terminator 2, one of the deleted scenes. None of those faces look quite right, which is
Yeah.
weird.
It's
Oh,
nice that they set up this weird decompression scene. But of course, Arnie has spent the last minute or so having this wonderful action sequence in a very fetching dress, fully padded.
mm.
I'm sure he would have had like apparently as well. He was a real prankster on set. He would do anything to keep people's spirits up and do stuff. Um, Golda Cat as well almost shows his face on several points in that scene. It's so weird when you see the actor and you're like, oh, I recognize that.
I know Mark Adams got one. He's got a wonderful face though, because in the after DS9, I became more familiar with the series. I began to notice that he is in a lot of stuff. So I think he was in a couple of episodes of Quincy MD. He was in Tango and Cash,
Mm.
which is really bizarre to realise. But you see him crop up in a lot of stuff because he was another one of these real journeyman actors who could do damn near anything you wanted of him.
Speaking of journeyman actors, you had the guy in the train with Arnie there, who
Hmm.
shares a very, very brief scene. Mickey Jones.
Hmm.
That scene, the Mars scene, there's two things about that. That's the scene that Arnie saved because they
Okay.
realized that they didn't have a big scene of Mars. They had nothing
Oh.
there. And they were like, "Well, sure, we need something of Mars," and they were like, "Well, it's too expensive." And so I think it was even like one of the effects guys went to Arnie and said, "Look, really sorry to say this, but we need this. Can you
Hmm.
please, please?"
Yeah.
make this happen. And yeah, he did it. And Arnie was the one who pushed it. But every time I see that shot, although it's a completely different league from in terms of effects and quality, I always
Mm.
think of like Racing Mars episode from Babylon 5.
Mm.
Because it's just the idea of these trains going across this Mars landscape.
Yeah, it's a really good visual, and 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 it was the right choice to keep that scene
Mm,
because like you say, without it, you really don't have Quaid's perspective on Mars in
no.
that way. He never really sees it. He's really inside for almost the entire movie after this point.
But also as well, let's face it, he has been running still at this point. He is still on his own. This is
Mm.
why it's such a weird movie, because although we're getting a Ronnie Cox moment at the moment, and my goodness, is it needed?
Mm.
Because honestly, Michael Ironside might as well be the villain here. But we
Mm.
are 50 minutes into the film. We have seen Sharon Stone once. We
Yep.
have yet to technically meet our female lead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Quaid still doesn't really know what's going on. It's a very strange film, and yet it works. It's this beautiful mix. And of course, as we get into, well, we'll see like the nicest part of Mars, and then we'll see like it'll slowly drop down, and we'll see different levels, and then we'll get finally to the mutant area of Mars.
Mm.
But there's so many things going on that they're still setting up here. Again, it's a wonderfully weird film,
Yeah.
but works really well.
Absolutely, and it's just crazy that it is. We are this far into it, and we're still being introduced to quite important elements.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's a fantastic bit of structuring.
I wonder what you can buy in the Mars gift shop. Like
Mm.
petrol bombs? I don't know.
Yeah,
And
it does.
go on.
No, I was just going to say one of the things this film does do is leaning. It's kind of again. I don't want to say it's zero, but it establishes one of the long-running tropes of genre fiction that Mars doesn't want to be a colony of Earth. It really doesn't. So
Yeah, it's weird. There's very few sci-fi authors that ever thought Mars would follow along with Earth. It's almost like they expect it to play the plucky underdog in anything.
hmm. I mean, it's understandable because it's one of the big concepts of hard sci-fi is getting Mars terraformed. It's played a role in some real major works, and anyone writing science fiction will normally find some way to have a version of it mixed in. So, but on film or on even on TV, because it hadn't really been anything but dealt with on TV. I mean, Star Trek, Mars was mentioned in regular Trek and TNG a few times, if I remember rightly, but it was just a given that it was part of the big old Federation.
Mm.
Most more grounded sci-fi consider looks at it more like, well, Mars is a bit of a crap hole and it takes work, but people who move there, they don't want to be under the heel. They're doing their thing.
There's there's definitely a reason for that, and a
Mm.
lot of that comes down to where this came from. So the new wave sci-fi was 60s and 70s, so it
Mm.
was very anti-establishment. So
Yeah.
it was the first time when, again, this feeds into cyberpunk, where up until that point, you always still portrayed the good authority as your authority, and the bad authority was
Mm.
other countries or villains or whatever. But of course, this movement was establishing that the government doesn't care. The government is
Yeah.
against you. So when it came to films like this, yes, the people in charge were absolutely the bad guys. And yeah, you just end up, and of course, in 80s America, you didn't really want to hear that. You still wanted to believe that the American government was good. But
Yeah.
it was, it was a really dark period. And so this translated into the movie. Um,
Yeah.
I, uh, there's so much to like about Arnie in this. Like, it's just his demeanor as well. He's like instantly like chilled with being around the mutants.
Hmm.
He's can't believe I'll use the word chill. But yeah, you really want to believe if this is I mean, like whatever reality he's in, if it's his dream, if he's the real person, if he's a
Hmm.
fake personality, but whatever, this personality, this version of Arnold does care.
Yeah. Quaid comes across as being a basically decent guy,
Mm,
and Hauser not so much. He comes across as a real asshole, even in the scenes before the big twist.
yeah.
But no, he does put in a real. He gives Quaid empathy. He he's he's in a strange environment. He's never met a mutant before, and yet he's trying, you know. And that does a
Yeah.
lot to endear a character to people.
So 80s setting. We're in a regular bar that's also a strip joint, and also apparently has other facilities.
Mm.
Only in 80s America.
Oh yeah,
By the way, the young lady with the extra chest endowments, she shows up in Trek. She
yeah.
had a couple of roles, and I had a look. By the way, people, please don't ever type in Total Recall cast. Where are they now on YouTube? The amount of AI generated
Oh
bullcrap on there. However, I'm gonna say that our lead, Rachel here, and our lady with the chest enhancement have aged far better than any of the other cast, and it looks. Good reason for that is that they still appear to be quite natural,
mm.
which is something that you really notice in Hollywood. Who's had work done and regrets it, and who doesn't.
Yeah,
And speaking of people with prosthetic work done, we have our guy with probably the most heavy prosthetics in the film, who's like a mutant and missing well half his face.
yep,
And by the time that I don't know when like the edition that you have was released,
mm.
but oh god, where is it? 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 There we go. But yeah, I mean Dean Norris ended up in Breaking Bad.
Yeah,
Did fantastically well, and I believe this was his like second or third film.
yeah, and he's another one of those real character actors. I
Yeah.
mean, outside of Breaking Bad, which made him far more well known to a lot of folks, he'd already between Total Recall and Bear, he's in a smorgasbord of stuff. I mean, I've seen him play a lot of military heavies and things.
Oh, he's one of those people that's born to play a military guy. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's also very, very good at it,
Mm.
which is commendable. I can't help but respect someone who can. It's often hard to remember that acting's a craft,
Yeah.
and it's not. Sometimes you just got to respect someone who puts in the work like that and can
Mm.
do it consistently.
Looking at Rachel here,
Hmm.
there's a couple of things. Firstly, um, this is going to sound very odd for me to mention this, but obviously after the slap, she has one shoulder bared,
Hmm.
and she then puts it back on. That is the most amount of her that you will see in this movie, which is really refreshing. She
Yeah.
is arguably more than the measure of Quaid.
Yep.
She has purpose, she has direction, she has great fight scene, and she was clearly like you'd listened to the interviews with her. She was clearly up for it. Now she's another one. She's still working today. She never went on and did massive, huge stuff, but she's really good in this, and it's so nice. And I think as well, it's the difference. I noticed this is looking at some of the films, especially with Sly Stallone as well, is that the action films, the danger you had is that the women in them got treated really, really badly.
Yes.
And they were really token. But when it came to a lot of Arnie's films, he wouldn't always go that way. He wouldn't always insist on this, that, and the other. In fact, if anything, he insisted on strong women because it made him look good. Again, she was never, it wasn't like she became a star of this. But again, she's one of those. She's still working today. She's still doing really well. She did quite an important film last year that was based on some cultural stuff that she wanted to raise. Fantastic. And you just think, yeah, she didn't have the career of, say, Sharon Stone, but then Sharon Stone had quite an intense career, and is now like, if you see them in as they look today, they look very, very different.
They do, but also Stone had a really there was a period in the 2000s where she was pretty much blacklisted.
Yeah, she had some all sorts of do you know what went on?
I think there was a studio. I know she's been quite vocal about it in recent years. I can't
Was it sort of a Weinstein thing?
I think it might have been, yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean,
she turned something down, and it kind of went from there because she pretty much disappeared. I mean, she had, I think she had a role in, it was either late, other than the only films I can remember post like 2000 would have been Basic Instinct 2, and I think there was an indie drama where she played a mum to a teenager, and that Giant, I think it was, or it was where you have a young disabled boy and an older, stronger boy who people took advantage of,
right?
And together they were a much stronger unit. They formed quite a touching friendship, and she was in that. And after that, nothing, which is really crazy because Sharon Stone was in a lot of stuff in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, she was,
and could only be relied on to be damn good.
She did. I'm just having a look now. She did a lot of stuff. It wasn't like as well that she stopped working during the early 2000s. But yeah, there was a definite change in what she was doing. There were like TV show appearances as opposed to movies, and it took a while, and it took sort of Basic Instinct 2, and then after that she sort of started to do more stuff. But it was definitely as well a mix as well. I will say, like, she was hired, during this, the director realized that she had this ability both on screen and in real life, and he wasn't shy about saying that as well, to be all sweet and light, but also then really nasty and cold.
Yeah.
And that obviously made her perfect for the character, but it also meant that she made a lot of enemies. So before this, she was in a film with Richard Chamberlain.
Yes,
King Solomon's Mines.
Yeah, yeah.
And she was roundly hated on that. Now, when people talk about that, though, you've got to add in the caveat that this is a woman who, when earlier in her career, she went to get her chest done. You know, as was almost expected of actresses, I think, at a certain point back then, or some actresses anyway. When she came around from the anaesthetic, the surgeon visited her, chatting away, and calmly informed her that he didn't think that she'd asked for a large enough chest, so he'd use the next size up. Welcome to Hollywood in the early 80s. You know, I mean, it's so weird. So, and being called a bitch because you stand your ground, being called difficult because you fight hard. This is somebody, by the way, who fought tooth and nail to get Leonardo DiCaprio and Russell Crowe in The Quick and the Dead.
Yeah.
When she was an exec producer. That's a masterful film, by the way.
Oh, it is. I was so glad it came up on our Christmas watch-alongs streams because it's such a fun film to watch. That one.
So it's weird as time goes on as well. If anything, and I do want to read her whole book because she's got a biography out, and it does seem like it's fascinating and probably more than a little nasty and cruel to watch as well. But sorry, cruel to read. But I would really like to see that because I think it adds an extra dimension. But she gives great value considering she basically has like 2 and a bit scenes here in this entire film.
She does a hell of a lot with what she's given.
Yeah.
And you believe she can stand up to Quaid, that she's a match for him. And that she's a match in a different way for Richter.
Oh dear. Sorry, I realized as well I missed this. At the beginning of the scene that we're watching, which is the famous doctor scene, there's a good use of mirrors as well in framing because at points you see just Arnie and the doctor. Other times in the reflection you see just Arnie, so it's almost like he's talking to nobody. There's all sorts of really good stuff there, and yeah, then we're into second unit and action, and Arnie getting really physical. Finally, with some people that are his size that he can actually match up to. And then Sharon starts. We should have had a drinking game, by the way. How many kicks to the balls? Like a kick to the balls as a shot. We'd all be passed out by the end of the film.
Yeah, it would be smashed. And something else to note is that Arnie's not, other than that scene the 2 scenes at the start where he's in bed with Sharon Stone and when he's at the quarry at work.
Yeah.
He's actually wearing a lot of layers for the most part.
Yes.
They do a lot to hide, well, the Arniness about him.
Yeah.
So he looks less imposing, which is real hard to do.
I'm sorry. Now that I've seen it, I can never unsee it. You know when Richter got the call from Sharon Stone at the bar? He was drinking a strawberry milkshake. Watch it back. Watch it back after this. Doesn't matter how tough he is. He was drinking what clearly looks like a strawberry milkshake.
I mean,
bonus points that they'd made it blue for a tie-in that they probably didn't expect. But yes, strawberry milkshake.
Sorry, I'm just watching this wonderful fight scene. This is...
Oh, they are so up. She again, Rachel is really up for it. In fact, both of them are.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't want to tie it into something else, but put it this way: I cannot believe that this second unit action director, directed action this good at this short notice, and then produced some shoddy work on another film. It's crazy. Though I do like that they did manage to get some good old-fashioned Pepsi sponsorship in.
That is quite amusing. All the very subtle Pepsi logos.
Yeah. Why does Sharon do this though? Just a trope of the 80s with characters just with the bad guys just allowing themselves to be killed and
I mean, it wasn't really allowing. She was trying to go for a gun.
Yeah.
Well, it says a lot about her and Richter with what comes next, to be honest.
Yes, yeah, true. But again, it's this Mr. and Mrs. Smith dynamic. It's like she's aware that he's got memory issues and something is going on, but it's all business, and they get into the mode, and it's like they've never not been partners.
Yeah, completely. And hindsight generally makes you feel like Richter has lost something there.
Yes.
which does make some of the latter bits of this movie kind of amusing, especially in what's coming up in the next big beat.
So, fun and games for people who look at this and go, well, the effects don't look that great. Not keen on it. So back when this was made, I've just noticed some weird grading issues on my copy. So blue screen was the effect. That was what you used at the back in the background of your shots, not green screen, blue screen.
Yeah.
It's weird because we almost still refer to it sometimes as blue screened in. And of course, you see a big green screen in the back of a shot. So if you're using blue screen, well, then you need to make sure that you don't get light leaking onto it. But of course, you're not going to do that because the only thing that would really damage a blue screen shot is to have any form of red light on it. So as long as you're not filming in any form of set that relies on the color red, you'll be fine. Yes. So they had a lot of challenges with shooting the effects on this and the plates because they were using the very worst backgrounds to try and integrate into some of these shots. So the mats don't look great. I'm sure there's an uber special, uber sexy edition where they've redigitized everything and so on and so forth. But yeah, sadly, some of the mats, they are a bit difficult. But this was cutting edge for its day.
It was. I mean, I've always appreciated what they did with this, flaws and all, because it's not easy to do what they did.
Oh no.
And the fact that it looks amazing with maybe a few wrinkles and doesn't look like absolutely diabolical, that's actually real impressive.
Yeah. And you look at the movement in these shots and the way they're getting stuff. And again, it's like it's almost like I feel the need to remind people. I know if you're of a certain age, you will get this already, but we all forget. You've seen all the pictures of Steven Spielberg buy a big 35mm camera. You know how big those puppies are. They are not easy. Like I've shot using that very big camera with the Panavision on it. I've shot doing that handheld. It is a pain in the ass. It is really heavy. To get any movement with that, you need a team that's working really well. You need grip, just working so well. If you're going handheld, it's difficult. Steadicam was just still a very, very early concept at this time. Still a lot to do with it. So they are getting so much movement in all these shots. I mean, just in the bar as well. Look at the speed that the camera's going at.
Yeah.
To get these, and it's so quick. Again, beautiful stuff. You don't see this in films nowadays. And honestly, because people aren't good enough to do that anymore. You would see it in maybe low budget films where they still have that practical effect, but really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say it's not even a work ethic. There's an element of skill, innate talent that it's not so much that it's not even out there. It's not developed enough nowadays, which is a real shame, as there are some frankly amazing filmmakers out there whose films have been let down.
Yeah.
When they could have been something special. So yeah, and you're right. It is one hell of the whole sequence of them moving into the bar, and it's pretty impressive for how it runs.
And it's utter carnage as well when this kicks off. They do such a good job, and I'm not going to say iconic because, like, if there's things that everyone remembers from this. The passport control, the Mars stuff, and that isn't it. But this is a really good fight sequence because it just builds up, and there's a lot of people involved, and yet it works. Also, as well, again, Ronnie Cox used really sparingly. Like,
oh yeah,
it's a quick glimpse. It's like, this is the bad guy. This is who you're always working towards, and then it cuts off. It's so simple. I'd also say in terms of hired goons, hired security, the standard, police squad that you're trying to beat up. I always really like the red visors on these guys. It just looks really nice.
I mean, I can never get over the fact that they're basically wearing almost exactly the same gear as the cops in RoboCop did, because I think it might generally be the same armor.
I think they swapped. I think a lot of props at this time would get swapped as well. I mean, I don't know if they still do. I'd imagine they do, but
I mean, there was a period where almost every sci-fi show was reusing Starship Troopers kit,
yes.
and that went on for a good decade and a half after that movie. So,
By the way, there's a slight thing that's bothered me when I was watching this frame by frame. You'll see the mother here, but she sort of
yeah,
suddenly disappears towards the end of the movie. But
that's true.
there's never a reason for it. If anything, you then see the little girl with
With Tony.
yeah.
That's actually a really good point. That's kind of intriguing.
Now I know they say in these films, show don't tell, but one thing I really enjoy about this part of the film is that it would be so easy to suddenly like to say, oh, the film gets derailed because they suddenly go all archaeology and Raiders of the Lost Ark and it's tombs and stuff like that. But there's it kind of works. It adds this sense of that there's something else out there, and yeah, it's not bad though. The fact that they can climb through the walls is a bit weird. Now, this guy. So, our kind of second in command, kind of security guy. I always think of Die Hard. I think it's Die Hard. Is it the first Die Hard? He's one of the guys. I want to say he's one of the feds. Yeah.
I don't think he is.
What's
but he looks a lot like him.
He's like a douchey fed. I'm trying to think. Okay,
I'm sure
I'm now going to chase it up and try and figure out who he is.
I think he's played more than a few of those in his time, though. And God, this film made a lot of use of 9mm full auto machine pistols.
Do you know if there was any kind of because I believe there was an outcry over the amount of violence in this. I think so.
I mean, RoboCop had made a real impact, so people knew what Verhoeven was about. And Arnie, let's be honest, most of his films in the 80s were kind of pushing the limit.
Yeah.
While still being blockbusters. So, I mean, this it doesn't sugarcoat anything. The mutants are not impossibly attractive. The makeup looks nasty. It looks, for all it you don't get. Sure, anyone with a false eye that doesn't move because they're not that advanced prosthetics, but the makeup all looks kind of unpleasantly believable.
Yep.
Like they are actual mutations that have caused this.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, and couple that with, like you say, Verhoeven. He knew how to stage an action sequence and make it gory. And I said he didn't spare the squib budget. They went all out. So it's not. I mean, I do remember that it did raise some hackles at the time. It was, yeah, it was a moment.
Was it? I think there was an element of because some of the advertising in the UK used quite explicit stuff to sell the film.
That wouldn't surprise me. I don't remember myself because I wasn't in the country at the time, but I do remember most of most of the trailers for it did not shy away from what the film was about.
Yeah. I know that when it came to the film being advertised, they had issues with. I think Arnie didn't like the teaser trailer and thought it looked stupid and was really, really quite annoyed. And there was no buzz about the film because the trailer was just didn't work.
Yeah.
So he pushed Carol Co to both do another trailer and like sink a load of money in. So they really did push it. When this came out, this did pretty well. I think it was like fifth,
Yeah.
sixth movie of the year. However, when it came out, it was one of the busiest years for American cinema ever in terms of blockbusters. Like there were literally dozens of films coming out and big films as well because it was blockbusters were hitting, and it was one of those
Yeah.
things that it just everyone knew there was money to be made. So even though it didn't make a ton of money, at the same time, it's like the context of it. There were a lot of other stuff. So here, for instance, Dick Tracy, Another 48 Hours, Back to the Future 3, Days of Thunder, Die Hard 2, RoboCop 2.
Yeah. Dang, that's a
Yeah.
big old slate.
So again, there was a lot of squeezing around, and so you only had a weekend or two to make your money, and then you were going to be squeezed out into the smaller screens by other films. So, but I mean, it did well. It did what it needed to do. It made money for everyone involved. It raised Schwarzenegger's brand, which was arguably that was the big win from this, because other people. Like, it wasn't like other people didn't get a push. Obviously, Sharon Stone got a huge push from this. But beyond those two, you can't really say that everyone else suddenly had, like, this extra feather in their cap.
No, not really. It's
ironically, it's only people like Michael Ironside in retrospect. So people talk to him at the sci-fi conventions now about that, but not then, which is weird.
Very.
Quaid, this was one. I think this was one of the reasons why the team won its special Oscar. They're during the making of, and I don't know if this is hyperbole, but people actually were asking whether this mutation was real. Like, was this just effects makeup, or was there something else?
It is some good makeup work. It really is.
I would say
Uatu is
arguably as
stunning.
good is actors standing by walls that suddenly have these huge mining machines forced through them. And the fact that nobody got injured in this is incredible. Well, actually, I think there were a couple of injuries, but nothing serious. And again, beautiful lighting as well. Beautiful.
And the sort of gunplay that is just hilariously Hollywood.
Oh yeah, yeah. How many bullets can you fit into a small magazine? Oh, 300,000.
But then Verhoeven's relation to violence was very specific because I think he grew up under Nazi occupation, if I remember rightly.
Yes, this was his big counter to Starship Troopers, when people tried to have a pop at him for, like glorifying fascism, and he was like, "Do you really not realize who the fudge I am and what I grew up with?" He was very kind of clear about, look, I know exactly what it's like to grow up under the worst people, so please don't try and fob me off.
Definitely.
Damn, I'm still trying to find this guy on IMDb. Because I know him from somewhere. Oh well.
Yeah.
Again, real Hollywood bad guy stuff. It's like just kill the hero. Kill the hero. Just do it. It's almost like I suppose Dr. Evil has had so much of an influence because you kind of hear it in the back of your head. You're like, yeah, just kill him now. No, I need to let him get away with it. Okay, so the guy,
Yeah.
I only found him. His name is Mark Gregory, and I'm going to go through, and he's done loads of stuff. He did a voice for Ninja Gaiden. I can't believe that.
Wow.
So anyway, D, tell us what you think about this moment, whilst I desperately try and find out if you starred in something.
Oh, it's a nice little reveal here that Hauser was a complete dick the whole time, and everything was a play to uncover the resistance. I'll be honest, I was only like 13 when I first watched this, and I didn't see it coming. It was, in retrospect, everything that Cohagen's done to push Quaid and Richter to guide Quaid down the line, kind of brilliant in retrospect, because it does all lead him towards Kuatu, where they can off him. It's brilliant.
It is. It is really well played. I mean, this is one of the things that maybe acts against this being real, is that like he's had to engineer this. It's not like a whole random event. This is a random event. He wanted these people here at this point, and he's got them here, and yet they've not killed him, and nobody has killed them.
Yeah.
And it's shocking. By the way, our guy that I couldn't figure out where I knew him from, he's RoboCop. He's the guy. So in the underground car park scene where they're shooting at him.
The SWAT commander.
Yeah. And I got him mixed up with the same SWAT commanders who are outside Nakatomi when they do the failed bid to get in the building the first time. I gotta say, the use of monitors in this film is just wonderful. And I know, again, it sounds really stupid. By the way, folks, if you're shooting on 35mm old-fashioned film and you're using monitors, it's not as easy as it sounds. You need to get these things calibrated. Otherwise, you end up with those bars that go up and down the screen that you see. They're really annoying. But they fit in monitors every way they can. They tell a lot of this story through it, which is interesting because then you're seeing it's like a second dimension. And since you could argue that there's a story of the real world is showing through the monitor more than once, and he's in the dream looking at it, love it.
It's a film with more layers than it has any right to have.
Yeah. Now, I think they just, they've tweaked a few things from the original Recall scene. But then they've given this like a more militaristic kind of lick of paint.
Yeah.
And that's why you get away with seeing this in this way. But again, it's a really good use of like a simple set.
Absolutely. I mean, the recall machines themselves are really nicely designed.
Oh, they're lovely. There's a reason why the reboot had to use, and it was like a prime part. Anytime you saw any advertising for the reboot, it was that damn machine in the background.
God, Cox is such a brilliant, smarmy bastard, isn't he?
Yeah, and it's weird because when you think he was, he like for RoboCop, the two main villains were two of the most trusted people, two of the nicest people in terms of the characters they played, and he had them play against type. And then Ronnie Cox does both. And again, the more I read, the more I see this is just a RoboCop reunion, which is also quite telling, as clearly they didn't none of them wanted RoboCop 2. Obviously, some of them can't because their characters were killed off. But it's interesting that they, like Verhoeven, almost like showing up Hollywood by going, look, I've taken your team. I'm doing things my way. This is what I want.
Well, he seems to be one of those directors who finds people he works well with, and he likes to work with them again. Because there's actors all across his movies that especially his Hollywood ones, but you just recognize them from all over. They crop up again and again. I'm genuinely surprised Cox didn't appear in Starship Troopers in any way, even just a cameo. To be fair,
I might check that. It might be more a timing issue than anything else. Because
quite
obviously,
possibly. Yeah.
obviously we have the Quaid, not Quaid guy. I always call him Quaid because the mutation in his chest says Quaid, and
Yeah.
that's what I always think of him of. But he turns up as the kind of kooky,
Yeah.
cowardly.
He he's at for big fort defense scene, which is and gets one of the best death scenes, as does
But
this guy.
yeah, but fair play as well. Arnie, like they have to do a lot of silly stuff in this film. Let's face it.
Mm.
You know, it's almost like Star Trek acting. But yeah, in terms of deaths, and it's almost a nod as well, isn't it, to the RoboCop information spike.
Mm.
It's weird when I first saw this because I saw this when I was very young, as did a lot of kids at the time. Like
Oh.
watching films like this was something that always got around parents because they didn't know better. Um,
Mm.
the way that he wore the little bit of stuff over his hand reminded me of the Centurions toys, the Power
Mm.
Extreme, because they had these
Yeah.
little bits of armor on bits of them, and I was like, wow, yes,
Ah, Centurions. There's a deep cut.
there's a we've lost what
As
little of
was
our
that.
audience we had.
It's fine. I've watched George's videos. Anyone who watches his stuff adjacent to the Fluff and Hammer, we're fine. If we get any of his audience, we're sorted.
Oh, if we've got any of his audience, I'm actually quite touched because
Actually, yeah.
he has a far superior audience.
Yeah, his stuff is pretty dang impressive, I must say.
There's a there's a slight there is a slight weird point with this Cox's character. Does he live? Does he die?
Hmm.
You kind of he kind of flips back and forth. You can tell that there were moments that maybe the filmmakers did have to do a few things and change a few things,
Hmm.
and there are moments that don't always work. Also, now I'd be interested to find out. I guarantee you, if I type in Total Recall and fish, I guarantee you someone will have checked to make sure that the fish weren't harmed.
Yeah.
Seriously, that would have happened because that would have
Hmm.
been the Humane Animal Society had their little thing in the credits. So
Yeah. It's something that is real hard because no one likes to see animals get killed
no,
at all. Not especially not just to make a movie.
I'm surprised that nobody has tried to melt through the fan and go up and try and get access manually to fresh air. But I understand why they didn't.
Hmm.
I also like the you've had, let's face it, the corporate start with a bit of building site. You've had offices, you've had hotels, you've had the mutant city, and almost the rest of this film is kind of quarries and rocks
Yeah.
and the most unglamorous, not poorly lit, minimally lit
Hmm.
segments, and it just you have all these lovely little scenes. Oh, I should probably say about a quirk of this film that I noticed because this is a
Hmm.
quirk that any of you can look up. If you go to IMDb and you look up Total Recall,
Yeah.
and you'll have the trailer, and you'll have some making ofs which are good,
Hmm.
and you'll have some photos. Do you know how many photos are available for this film?
No, go on.
854.
Really?
Do you want to know why there's 854 stills available on IMDb for this movie?
Go on.
Because somebody who might be a fan of Rachel Ticotin has taken screenshots, multiple screenshots of every single frame apparently of Rachel Ticotin and put it in as a pic. Somebody is clearly making a point. I don't know if it's Rachel Ticotin's mother. It's the sort of thing that mothers would do. But if you set it up, if you put it on like a screen, you'll start scrolling through. You've got at the beginning, you've got stills, the proper stills. You've actually got some really nice stills in there as well, which is something. You've got like premiere shots. You got the posters and all of that. And then literally after that, you've got 11 shots of Rachel Dakotan from her first meeting Arnie. You've then got 6 of the fight. You then go back to regular stuff. You've then got like a dozen of her just recognizing Arnie in the bar. And it's like, yeah, somebody is an Uber fan. Somebody wanted to really just go, hey, do you remember that Rachel Dakotan was in this? There we go.
That's kind of amusing. Gosh, this is a lovely bit of...
Go
on. Is this a matte or a model? Because it looks wonderful either way.
Okay, so it is a model. It is a huge model. And I'm hoping to get the exact link for this, but they were trying to work out how they were going to portray this. And they had all these buildings that they were looking at. So brutalism and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Lots of skyscrapers in New York. And they were trying to figure it out. One of them chucked the book on the desk and it spun. And they looked at it upside down and they suddenly went, oh, that's it.
Light bulb moment.
These are skyscrapers, but just upside down skyscrapers. And it makes perfect sense. When you look at them, they are just almost, I mean, honestly, although it's a different styling, and I've now Art Deco, there we go. But look at that and tell me that one of them doesn't have slight shades of the Ghostbuster building.
Oh no, you bang on there.
Yeah, so it's like it's a very Manhattan-esque thing. Oh, and just the moving around of Michael Ironside and the guards here. I know it sounds really silly for me to harp on about it, but look at the camera move. It's so slick. And you know that they probably got a space about 10 meters by 10 meters. And it was like, right, Michael, right, today you're going to run around these weird block things 20 times. Okay, what else am I going to do? That's it. Every single thing. And there are moments when they're running around that certain people hold their guns up high for the good of the shot. And sometimes they drop them low. And you know that Verhoeven has told them to do that because it works good as a diagonal. There is so much, by the way, diagonal movement in this film. It's nuts. But they're like the reveals, and you can see the people walking into frame or on a zoom or stuff like this, and it's just beautiful. Sorry, you can tell I got really excited with the camera framing when I was doing the stills for this.
Understandable. How to admit though, it's kind of funny that they didn't take the opportunity to have all those guards shoot each other.
Yeah, this is, I think they needed it for the factor of this is a hologram. But you're right, they would have shot each other in the feet for absolute certainty. But then later on, they do play the expected gag. Though Arnie shoots so many people with one magazine here. And then I love how the missus jumps in and just goes, yeah, I'll have some of that.
You have to imagine, though, the stunt team on this must have been having a real ball.
Oh, they were jumping around all over the place. It's just odd that you see him in one shot literally run dry on the magazine, like it clicks dry, and then 2 seconds later it's just full again. Because of course it's the 80s and it's just like, yeah.
Action movie logic in full swing here.
But again, Rachel is just... This is an 80s movie. It sounds odd to say this now, but things have changed so much. You're in an Arnie movie, and who's holding the gun in this scene? Who's the person doing the action in this scene? It's not Arnie. You know, there's a balance. It's like, and I think a lot of that as well is Arnie going, look, let's make this a proper fair movie with this stuff going on.
I mean,
now, just to break the illusion for those at home, where are you up to? Because we're probably going to have different versions here. So
I'm on the lift, and
has it just gone up?
Arnie just did a hip toss on Ironside.
Okay. Poor old Michael Ironside got really injured. I think it was either his arm, shoulder, or his hips or something. But he basically couldn't fight. And so there was so little stuff being done. Arnie was really having to nursemaid him. And then there was a lot of just like stuntman in and stuff. So the fact that they managed to pull off what they could, I take it you just lost the arms.
Yeah, that's one of the best deaths in cinema, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Arms ripped off. It's quite wonderful. No, I was just going to say that one thing it does for me is that the sequence leading up to this is probably Arnie playing Quaid as more of an Arnie character more than he does at any other point in the film.
Yes.
He's making quips, he's shooting one-handed, he's doing everything you kind of think of for for an Arnie character.
It's weird as well because the thing that I think both he and Verhoeven have talked about is Verhoeven is a very bullish director who doesn't mince around. So if he wants it faster, he'll say faster. And Arnie will admit, although he likes his way and he's a canary, he tweets a lot and he gets what he wants. But at the same time, he will respect a director that holds his ground. Hence why he works with Cameron. Cameron and Verhoeven are not that different. So
No,
a
they
lot of
really
the
are.
stuff. So there's footage of, again, like Verhoeven in the ground for the finale and the Mars going, no, I want you to do it this way and I want you to do it this fast. And Arnie will just go, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes the biggest actors are the ones that know they have to work with the crew the most. That's why they're so successful. I want to just give a shout out here in terms of like strength. Ronnie Cox has been shot in the chest multiple times. I just want you to be aware of that. This is an old man that has been shot in the chest multiple times. He should be dead.
Yeah.
Arnie has been clipped. Ronnie has been shot. They're all still going. Ronnie has obviously been taking his Sanatogen. He's just like, wow.
Clearly, Mars does something to the body to keep you going that long.
Work, rest, and play, or something like that. Oh my god, talk about flashbacks. Again, simple stuff. On set, they realized, look, why have this horizontally and bother with wires? Why don't we just have this vertically? So a lot of the stuff that you're seeing is just simple vertical stuff.
Especially if someone like Arnold, who would have been quite capable of, hauling himself up and doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because he is, as you mentioned as well, he's a lither Arnie. He's like post bodybuilding. He's just doing his stuff. But fair play to the rest of the crew. And again, in the story, Ronnie Cox is still hanging on. Remember, he has been shot multiple times in the chest. So it's
like Quaid and Melina both have massive injuries to both arms from the mining machine.
Oh god, yeah.
So the fact that they've been able to do anything at this point is kind of impressive in its own right.
The decompression scene is always really odd because it's been happening from the moment that he fell out. They go so far with it though. It's like I don't know at the time if it was believable.
It's one of the more.
It's a very Verhoeven thing, isn't it?
It's very Verhoeven. It's very over the top in a lot of ways. It's clearly over the top, but it gets across the point that you can't live on the surface of Mars. Even though, from my understanding, you probably wouldn't decompress anything like that.
Yeah.
Because it's not that sort of environment. But
it's more like you would suffocate and there would be there would be other stuff going on that you weren't aware of, but these the big tube things, these were models. But these were, I want to say they were bigatures.
That would make sense. I mean, it's a wonderful bit of design work to get across what it's. Oh, I hadn't read. I've just seen
what the
Cohaagen finally bite it. with his. I hadn't
Yeah.
realised how far out the eyes come. Jesus,
Yeah.
it's been a while since I've watched this properly, but
I think that's the thing that thing I find the most unbelievable is because it goes so far, and because like our two leads as well, they go so far.
hmm,
It's that when the atmosphere finally kicks in, that they just get up and dust themselves off, without any like
yeah,
issue, and then go,
yeah,
"Should we have a snog? Yeah, let's do it." And it's like, hang on, you should be bleeding out of every orifice, and
hmm,
probably not in a good way. Not that there's a good way to bleed out of every orifice.
quite.
Some good Star Trek acting though
Oh yeah,
in the Mars, and apparently is like somebody even put it on YouTube. This is why you should really never watch YouTube making ofs. Obviously apart from our like waffle track, but
absolutely.
they said that somebody actually put up scenes that ruined a film, and they had a picture of Sharon Stone doing her suggestive bed scene with Arnie. And it turned out that one person was rocking his table too much before the gas cloud hit the window. And this person on YouTube was framing it like that destroyed Total Recall. And it was like, look, I'd watched this film a bunch of times and I'd never even noticed that before.
Yeah, I mean you've got to really be kind of a little bit on the obsessive side for that to ruin the film for you.
Oh, it's clickbaiting.
Oh yeah.
It's like the postage. Oh, so there was a quick picture of the mother. So the mother did turn up.
Ah,
But yeah, it's just like you'll see a badly doctored picture of Sharon Stone making her look like a zombie, and it's like, yes, you won't believe how old they look now, and it's like, well, actually, I probably would believe that they've
yeah,
gotten older, considering it's been a little bit of a while since the film came
yeah.
out.
I mean, I make a point. I just avoid any of those. Anytime I see a tag like that, it's like, right, ignore, ignore, ignore. Because
It's
it's like,
yeah,
I mean,
it's
yeah,
the
people get
the
old, people change.
but also as well, it's like a generational thing as well. It's like a lot of people are just discovering this film for the first time.
Hmm.
It's just from such a different time of Hollywood. Um, Beautiful effects work. I'm just going to
Oh
quickly
yes.
add in here. So clouds were probably done using cloud tanks,
Hmm.
which is water and emulsion. Big fish tank, salt water on the bottom, fresh water on the top, and then you pump in paint and water, and that's how you get the clouds.
Yep. It's
And
an oldie but a goodie.
I've done it before, and it's lovely to see. And then
Hmm.
they've done all this wonderful mat. This ending though is so weird because if this is a dream, Quaid is imagining the people
Yeah.
because this would
Yeah.
all have to be from Quaid's dream.
Hmm.
Likewise as well, our two heroes are unblemished by the fact that they almost had their eyes sucked out of the skull.
Yes.
And
It.
it's just yeah, there's so many odd things about this moment. And the joy as well of Mars finally getting an atmosphere
Hmm.
is actually sold by extras as much as it is the lead actors. You've got the guys in
Hmm.
the cafe and you've got the guys in the mutant town or whatever you want to call it. They're selling it
Yeah.
just as much as Arnie and Rachel are, which I think
Absolutely.
is lovely.
It's a it's a big moment, and like it is. Yeah. They get the whole. Everyone's playing. This is something that could so easily have just been Arnie and Rachel
Yeah.
selling the moment, but no, everyone's kind of involved.
And depending on where you are, obviously the big pullback shot, you can kind of see the frames where they backlit and back projected.
Hmm.
But there is one, two, three, four, five, six, I believe. Six separate elements. Maybe
Yeah.
seven, actually.
Hmm.
That's just
That's a
beautiful.
lot.
And
Yeah.
that's on a model as well. It's
Hmm.
like, wow.
But for a
And
final scene, that's a good way to come up with it.
and the music as well, which you
Hmm.
noted earlier as well. There's like musical themes and stuff. And of course, there's a couple of ways this can go now. Arnie wakes up in Recall. Arnie is dead at Recall.
Arnie's a vegetable at Recall.
Arnie's a vegetable. Or they stop kissing and Arnie goes, what the fudge am I meant to do now?
Yes, that as well. It's a good film. I hadn't realised until you went through the list of how many big films hit the same year this came out.
Oh, it was because Hollywood had a couple of big blockbusters, and you were, again, as you said as well, like Arnie was at the height of his powers, so you had all these films. So like Total Recall 2, sorry, not Total Recall, Die Hard 2 came out because Die Hard was so big. So everyone knew that all these blockbusters could get sequels. So it was a crazy time. There was the oversaturation. So this
Yeah.
was when the curve started to go upwards. I think it would be another 5-6 years before you then started to get to Last Action Hero level. Ironically, I think during this time, I think it was when Stallone was struggling to do stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, Stallone, I think, was Stop on My One Will Shoot was
I think so. So right, it's not far
this
off
sort
that time, is it?
yeah. I think he did that before Arnie did. But did Arnie do Twins in the 80s or the 90s?
Oh, I think that was later.
Yeah.
I think that was after some of his acting bubble burst.
I know he certainly did that one with DeVito and Emma Thompson where his character becomes pregnant. That was certainly towards the later end of the 90s.
Yeah. Oh, Last Action Hero was 93. And Sixth Day was 2000. So, yeah.
Yeah, Sixth Day was his last film before going into office as governor. Eraser had kind of been his last kind of big action flick, though, that people kind of went to see. That was, I think, 97, 98?
Yeah, but you also that was 96. But of course,
really?
the big thing that happened was Batman and Robin in 97 and End of Days 99.
Yeah.
Kind of just stuff started to cool off.
Yes, and I was thinking, End of Days, I've got a little bit of a soft spot for because it's a very specific film for a very specific time, and
is that the Gabriel Byrne?
yeah,
it's
one of those. It's the odd film where it probably, if it hadn't been Arnie playing the lead, it might have been better. But it has some real odd moments, like Miriam Margolyes playing a really vicious, evil nun.
Oh, that's always good.
Yeah. But yeah, this was kind of set the tone for the next few films for him, to be fair. I mean,
yeah,
this, then T2.
Yeah, I think that
was Kindergarten Cop before this, between
Ooh.
this and T2.
I'll tell you what. Let's very, very, very quickly. Let me just. So it had. So Twins was just before this in '88.
Okay.
Then this year, so you had Total Recall, Kindergarten Cop in '90, Terminator 2 in '91. My God, talk about like getting all your hits close together. Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
So I apologize. Everything has just moved too fast. It's me and technology. And then Last Action Hero was 93, which was The Wobble. True Lies was 94. Junior, you talked about, was 94 as well. Eraser was 96. Jingle All the Way was 96. Batman and Robin and End of Days 97 and 99. And then honestly, you're into like Collateral Damage. T3 in 2003. And then it just sort of, yeah.
Then he becomes governor of California for
the
next stretch.
So he did, I think, Around the World in 80 Days, which obviously did not go well. That was 2004. And then the next thing he does is 2010 with The Expendables.
Yes.
And credit to him, he's done bits since then, but not massive amounts.
I mean, his first big film after leaving office was The Last Stand, which is quite a fun action movie, to be fair.
Mm.
He plays more. He's playing up his age quite a bit in that one. He and Stallone did. Was it Get Out or
Escape Plan?
Escape Plan? That was
Mm.
it. But I know he did an odd little film with Jackie Chan. Or,
Oh yes. Okay. Yeah.
so I always forget the name of it, but it's one of those things
Is
you just go, oh, that's interesting.
that would be the one that would be I think it's a Chinese film, Chinese
Yeah,
funded
yeah,
film.
it
Yeah.
is.
Okay, so that's a weird one. That will definitely be that's something I might even look into because it's a very odd, like, it's
Hmm.
known as one thing here, it's a different thing over there.
Yeah.
The film that was released here was a standalone, but it's technically a sequel to another film. It's very, very
Yes.
odd. And I tried watching it, and it is weird as hell because it's
Hmm.
literally you watching a film and you don't know what's going on because it's a sequel to something else. So,
Yeah. But it's worth it for a very heavily mustachioed Arnie fighting Jackie Chan.
yeah. Although,
That's.
if anyone's interested as well, check out Secret Level on
Oh
Amazon Prime at the
yes.
moment because he's having a bit of an interesting time as one of the characters there.
I know that episode has gotten a little bit of flack from people, but I thoroughly enjoyed that. Mainly because his voice performance. He's not someone who has ever really done voice acting work,
Yeah.
but he's clearly having a bit of a ball,
Yeah,
poking fun
he
at
needs to
himself.
do more, definitely.
Hmm. Well, I mean,
Uh,
I get his newsletter every day, and he's one of those. He The way he's kind of he he's not afraid to acknowledge his failings,
yep.
is Arnie, and he's reached a point where he's very clear about what he believes in, and he has no truck with certain elements that he
Oh,
recognizes.
I think as well. He's gone after bullies before.
Oh
He's
yeah,
got you know he's really he's being himself. And the
absolutely.
interesting thing is that he occupies a certain space where I don't even think he's that political anymore. Um,
Well,
like I've not seen much of his.
he'd always been a card carrying Republican,
Hmm.
but in kind of like the very traditional
Yeah,
image of what a Republican should be. So I work to the opinion, although I don't agree with those policies or a lot of conservative politicians, I do think there's actually a place for it, but
yeah,
proper, but only if you're being honest.
hmm,
And a lot of people who claim to be those things nowadays are using it as cover for some much nastier stuff. Not to, and
yeah.
Arnie, to his credit, and he said this, he was born post World War II in Austria. His father and almost every adult he grew up around had fought in the German army. They'd been members of the Nazi party, and they were broken men. And he's been quite clear. He's seen what these ideologies do, and the people that are left in the wake, who've believed in, who've been caught up in that rhetoric, and he has no time for it. Like I say, he calls out bullies very freely. I mean,
Hmm.
he he is one of the most positive thinking individuals I think I can find because he he continually puts out stuff wherever he can do to talk to people. It's really quite wonderful to follow his feed sometimes because he does engage. He does try and highlight the stuff that is good in the world.
Hmm.
And yeah, and the
So,
stories you've been saying
go
about how he effectively brought Total Recall into existence, more or less,
on. Hmm.
and
Yeah,
his efforts with the crew is.
he so
Hmm,
Arnie had a lot of there's a lot of positive stories that you'll hear. I think one of them was the Michael Ironside's, I think it was sister. at the time
Yes,
was
yes.
seriously ill.
Mm.
Arnie not only found out about this and made sure that Michael was able to use Arnie's like phone to catch up on her and keep in contact, but Ironside later found out as well that Arnie had been actually checking in on her himself to see if she was okay and see if
Yeah.
there was anything he could do to help. He played a lot of jokes on set. He was fun on set. There are stories
Mm.
from various cast members, all positive. And at a time as well when men in Hollywood were really showing that they could do whatever they wanted,
Mm.
especially with their female counterparts. There's very little you hear from this time about negative stuff going on about Arnie. He
Mm.
definitely he realized that a good cast and crew, a solid cast and crew, a happy cast and crew makes for a good film, which is
Yeah.
what they've got here.
Yeah.
But
And that's not to say that he didn't mess around, 'cause we're well aware that he did cheat on
yes,
his wife, had an illegitimate son, but he was very clear to kind of that was separate from his work life.
yes, which is good.
There's 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 never really been anything to tie into that side of things. So
Cool. So
very
as we
interesting.
summing up of this film,
Mm.
right, so I don't know. I know it sounds like a basic question, but what did you think of it?
I love watching Total Recall. I'm glad to have had an opportunity to rewatch it because I hadn't done it in such a long time, and it's been great to go back for it and chat with you about it because it's always nice to go over things with someone who knows the film as much as you do, or better even, and has looked into it and knows nuggets of info. And it's the fact we both know stuff that neither of you ever did.
Yes, yes,
That
absolutely.
that's been wonderful to find stuff that we've both been able to surprise the other. Um, it's a film that I've always had a soft spot, mainly because it was on the trailers on my Terminator 2 VHS tape.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So I watched the trailer so many times just to get to Terminator 2 over the years. Um, but, and in terms of the hobby side of things, a lot of T2 inspired what has become the Gene Stealer cults today. They
Yeah,
take a lot of their inspiration for more body horror elements of the cultists. Is very inspired by the mutants of Mars. How the rock grinder vehicles, they're that
absolutely.
takes a lot from the mining. It takes a lot from real world mining machinery, but a lot of it uses that Total Recall inspiration for how it's integrated into a more fantastical piece of kit. So
Mm,
it's a film that it if you're a sci-fi fan, it's an important one to add to your watch list if you haven't watched it already.
yeah.
Although I imagine if you've listened to us two whittering on for 2+ hours, you must have seen it already. If not,
Yeah, hopefully.
if not, why have you listened to this first? Go back
Or
and watch it
maybe
without
maybe
us.
it's the thrilling visuals that I've managed to cobble together on the YouTube. You never know. Also, let's face it, they might have listened to the last Fluff and Hammer and gone, "Oh God, those hosts were so good. Therefore, I hope they're back and not Adam White."
Pretend you never know, but no, I've enjoyed this. What
Oh,
about you? What's your thoughts on it?
I just think it's a really, really nice movie. I think it has aged, but
Mm,
it's the sort of, put it this way, the sort of people that will be turned off because they think the effects and the prosthetics have aged a bit. The sort of
mm,
people that don't have the patience to appreciate them, well, they shouldn't be watching this film. It's not for
mm.
you. You're probably the same sort of person that doesn't like a black and white film, you know, um, or you don't like subtitles because you just think it's inauthentic, as opposed to somebody who has a genuine like a visual issue with subtitles.
Yeah.
Um, it's if you care about the way that cinema was going and had the potential to be, then you should watch this. You should also watch this because there's few directors who are creating unique visions nowadays are
Mm.
borrowing so heavily from this.
Oh yeah.
So heavily. So for instance, the likes of Nosferatu, you know,
Mm,
like there's one in and unfortunately increasingly rare films that has like a really good, powerful sense of horror or fear or action or impact when they have punches or suspense when there's a chase sequence. They're using old-fashioned techniques and they're not relying on the sort of banal, and I hate to say it, but Marvel style special effects, which makes everything not special.
Well, one thing that in
Cool.
recent years I've become somewhat gratified to see happen is that there's been a trend where an awful lot of productions have made the conscious choice to go back to having as much physical as they can, not just in terms of makeup or set dressing, but model work
Mm.
and stuff to the extent that for some of the Star Wars shows, they've had to almost dig guys out of retirement or they've built ships as hobby projects. And then the team have gone, that's awesome. Can we use that in the production? Because
Yeah.
that's what we wanted. That makes so much more sense because it gives us that text. There's as good as CGI models are nowadays, there's something about a practical model that you can never quite replicate. Or the CGI model just, the brain disconnects from it. It can't accept it quite. So I've been quite gratified to see that become much more of a thing. And it's kind of bled through into some other genres as well. So we've seen a big resurgence in action cinema really over the last 15 years, but straight to what we call straight to DVD, straight to streaming, whatever, has thrown up some. It was already thrown from up in like the early 2000s, but it's become a real power in that sort of cinema.
Well, you've got because I mean, yeah, it tells the age of them because I know it as straight to video.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the last, I believe, the two number ones at the American box office this year, two of them have been, and both from Lionsgate, ironically, who suffered so
mm,
much last year. But they are both what you would call straight to DVD, straight to video. So you've got Flight Risk,
yeah,
and you've got that Gerard Butler sequel as well. And
yeah, yeah.
they are both absolute. They're kind of old school, and they're
Mm,
also as well. They're films where action stars, Gerald Butler and Mel Gibson, have kind of taken ownership and gone, yeah, this is a throwback film, but it
mm,
works better because of it. And the problem with a lot of the bigger films that try and say, we want real fight sequences, is that they'll have a real fight sequence, but then the next scene, they're back to using
yeah.
whatever they call it, the environment, the atmosphere, the whatever,
The volume.
the volume,
Yeah.
which I mean, yeah. I'm sorry. Once you recognize the volume, it's always there. Just shoot on a
It's
practical
a shame
set.
because the first time we saw something, The Mandalorian using that, it was a real watershed, but it's become watered down.
Very
It's
quickly,
a
yeah,
shame because it's a really great tool. There's stuff that it can do that you can't do anywhere else.
yeah,
But when you have something like Andor or um, the Acolyte or Skeleton Crew, where they don't use it or they don't use it as much, it becomes much more obvious when they do switch to it. And
yeah,
it's kind of a shame because it's a great, just the possibilities it offers to have to enable performance to have the actual background there, not to have to work into green screen. It's a real useful tool. It's just it's become. I think it's one of the things where because it was made such an impact, it's kind of it, it's like with a lot of special effects tools. The first few years when something big hits, it kind of overrides everything.
yeah.
So we saw it with CGI. We saw it with people trying to ape Star Wars style of doing things. God, remember the push for 3D films in the early 2000s?
Exactly, yeah.
Ugh,
And
glad
a
we've shot.
couple are good, but then it just gets watered down. It just gets
Yeah,
messy, and then everyone's sick of it.
exactly. And but now we're seeing it's you get to a point where a tool isn't as flashy and then just becomes a tool.
Hmm.
It's a part of the toolbox, and people start to treat it as such, not as a novelty, as something you just pluck out when you need it, as it's useful. It has its place, and let's see what we can do with it. And the thing that comes to me, I'm making all these weird hand gestures, and no one's going to can see this because it's I've got a video of us
Mate,
to watch.
my editing skills for YouTube are good, but they're not that bloody good.
I mean, I haven't got a camera, so I don't know why I'm doing all this, but
That's all
no,
right.
it's but we have had a run yet. Like you say, Lionsgate has had a good track record. We've seen the rise in the last years of Blumhouse and A24, who have done great things for genre filmmaking at the cinema, mainly horror, but they do kind of dabble in other stuff, which is great to see. And they've given filmmakers the chances to really stretch their muscles with some fun stuff. So I want to stay positive, as is my want, but hopefully we I think we're kind of due for a filmmaker of Verhoeven's instincts to come back around. I'd like
Hopefully
to
we
see
can get
one.
out. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve with an adoration for gore be good.
Oh, that's a tantalizing prospect.
Anyway, Mr. D, thank you for joining us for this lovely playthrough of Total Recall.
Not at all. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And hopefully, if you've joined us at home, hopefully we've not flummoxed you too much with our waffling. But let us know if you've enjoyed this. And
Yes, please do.
we don't know what's coming next. We'll probably play rock paper scissors over this, and the loser gets vented into the Martian atmosphere. But we'll come back with something soon. But if you do have any suggestions, let us know.
Oh, please
And
do. We're always open for ideas.
we'll see you soon. Take care.
Yeah. Have a good one, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.